What if the Israel-Palestine conflict isn't an ancient religious feud, but a century-old political struggle? Let's take a journey back in time to the early 1900s. The region that's now the epicenter of the conflict was under Ottoman rule, a melting pot of religious diversity. Muslims, Christians, and a small Jewish community coexisted in relative peace. But soon, two major transformations began to shape the future of this region. On one side, a distinct Palestinian identity started to emerge, separate from its broader ethnic Arab roots. On the other side of the spectrum, far away in Europe, the Zionist movement was gaining momentum. The Zionists argued that Judaism was not just a religion, but a nationality. They passionately believed that Jews deserved a homeland in the Middle East, a region steeped in historical significance as the ancestral homeland of the Jewish people. This vision sparked a mass Jewish immigration to the Middle East. As the world was still reeling from the aftermath of World War I, the British and French empires stepped in to fill the power vacuum left by the Ottomans. The British took up the reins, administrating what came to be known as the British Mandate for Palestine. As Jewish immigrants arrived in droves, the tension in the air was palpable. The influx of new arrivals led to conflicts with the local Arab population. By the 1930s, the situation had worsened to such an extent that the British felt compelled to impose restrictions on Jewish immigration. These are the roots of the Israel-Palestine conflict, a region once marked by religious diversity and coexistence, transformed by nationalistic movements and colonial power plays, with tensions ignited by mass immigration. The stage was set for a struggle that would continue to shape the region for the next century. As Jewish immigrants arrived in droves, conflicts with local Arabs began to escalate. The 1930s marked a turning point in the conflict. As the decade unfolded, the simmering tensions between the growing Jewish immigrant population and the local Arabs reached a boiling point. The British, who were administering the British Mandate for Palestine, found themselves in the middle of a quagmire. The influx of Jewish immigrants was leading to increased conflicts with local Arabs, necessitating the British to impose restrictions on Jewish immigration. This move, however, did little to quell the growing discontent. Meanwhile, in the heart of Europe, the Holocaust was unfolding, an event that would forever change the course of history. The mass extermination of Jews during World War II galvanized international sympathy and support for a Jewish state. The world had witnessed the horrors of the Holocaust, and the need for a safe haven for Jews became more apparent than ever. In 1947, the United Nations stepped in with a solution. It approved a plan to partition British Palestine into two separate states, Israel for Jews and Palestine for Arabs. Jerusalem, with its historical and religious significance, was to be an international zone, not belonging to either of the two states. The vision was clear: two states living side by side in peace. The Jews, who had long yearned for a homeland, embraced the plan with open arms. For them, it was the realization of a dream, a promise of a safe haven after years of persecution and displacement. However, the plan was met with staunch opposition from the Arab states. They perceived it as a continuation of colonialism, an imposition of foreign rule on Arab lands. Unable to reconcile with the idea of partition, they declared war. While the Jews accepted the plan, Arab states declared war, viewing it as a continuation of colonialism. This marked the start of a new chapter in the conflict, one that would have far-reaching consequences for the region and its people. 1948 witnessed the birth of a new state and the beginning of a new conflict. A significant year that marked a turning point in the Middle East's history. It was the year when the United Nations approved a plan to partition British Palestine into two states, Israel for Jews and Palestine for Arabs. Jerusalem, a city of immense historical and religious significance, was to be an international zone. The Jewish community welcomed the plan with open arms, seeing it as a beacon of hope, a sanctuary following the horrors of World War II and the Holocaust. However, this was not a sentiment shared by all. Many Arab states perceived the plan as a continuation of colonialism and promptly declared war. Despite the odds, Israel prevailed in the war, but did not confine itself to the borders defined by the United Nations. The newborn state extended its territories, displacing Palestinians in the process, and giving rise to a considerable refugee population. Suddenly, the map of the Middle East was redrawn. Israel controlled the majority of the territory, with the exception of the Gaza Strip, which was administered by Egypt, and the West Bank, which fell under Jordanian rule. This marked the onset of the enduring Arab-Israeli conflict, a struggle that would shape the region's history and politics for decades to come. Interestingly, over time, Arab states gradually started to make peace with Israel. Despite a lack of formal treaties, the animosity began to wane, and relations started to normalize. But while the broader Arab-Israeli conflict showed signs of easing, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict continued to simmer, a wound that refused to heal. So what started as a dream of a homeland for Jews after centuries of persecution became entangled in a web of political complexities, territorial disputes, and human rights issues. The birth of Israel, intended as a haven, became a trigger for a new conflict. While Arab states gradually made peace with Israel, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict persisted. A conflict that continues to this day, shaping not just the Middle East, but influencing world politics and human rights discourse. Opening, the 1967 war led to an occupation that further complicated the conflict. Imagine being caught in a whirlwind of historical events, where the landscape of your homeland is drastically altered. That's what happened in the region following the 1967 war, a war that resulted in Israel occupying the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem. This occupation was not just a physical takeover of land, it was a significant shift in the balance of power, and it brought about a new set of challenges for the people living there. Now visualize a map, with patches of land slowly changing color, signifying the increasing presence of Israeli settlers in these occupied territories. The establishment of these settlements was not a benign process. It was one fraught with tension and conflict, as Palestinians felt their lands were being encroached upon, their homes taken away. The settlements were like thorns, constant reminders of an occupation they opposed, and they stoked the fires of resentment and resistance. But it's important to remember that this is not just a story of land and politics, it's a story of people, of families, of communities. It's a story of a people's struggle for self-determination and a nation's quest for security. And in this story, there are no clear heroes or villains, just humans navigating the complex terrain of history, identity, and survival. The tensions resulting from the occupation and the settlements have not been easy to quell. Despite numerous peace efforts like the Oslo Accords, the path to resolution has been strewn with obstacles. Violence has erupted from both sides, each time pushing peace a little further away, each time making trust a little harder to rebuild. But amidst the turmoil, there's a shared understanding that the status quo cannot persist. The occupation, the settlements, the resulting tensions, they all point to a situation that is unsustainable. And so, the quest for a resolution continues, a resolution that not only addresses these issues but also brings an end to the broader conflict. Closing. Despite peace efforts, the situation remained complex, hindered by violence from both sides. Today, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict remains a significant global issue. As we navigate the complexities of the present, we find Israeli settlers entrenched in occupied territories. These settlements, considered illegal by international law, continue to be a source of tension between Israelis and Palestinians. The Gaza Strip, a small coastal region, is often at the heart of this tension. Periodic conflicts erupt, inflicting a heavy toll on its inhabitants. The blockade imposed by Israel, citing security concerns, has resulted in a humanitarian crisis for Palestinians living in Gaza. Access to basic necessities such as clean water, electricity, and medical supplies is severely restricted, leading to widespread despair. The West Bank tells a similar story. Here, the presence of Israeli settlers has fragmented the land, making the vision of a contiguous Palestinian state increasingly challenging. Palestinians living under Israeli occupation face restrictions on their movement, land confiscation, and house demolitions. In East Jerusalem, the situation is no less complex. While Israel considers it a part of its undivided capital, Palestinians see East Jerusalem as the capital of their future state. The city's holy sites, revered by Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike, add another layer of complexity to the conflict. Despite the grim picture, there is a growing consensus that the current state of affairs is unsustainable. The status quo not only perpetuates suffering, but also undermines the prospects of peace. There is a shared understanding that a resolution to the occupation and the broader conflict is necessary. Various solutions have been proposed, from the two-state solution envisioning Israel and Palestine existing side by side in peace, to a single state where Israelis and Palestinians share equal rights. However, the path to achieving these remains fraught with obstacles. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is not just a territorial dispute, It is a clash of narratives, histories, and identities. It is a human tragedy that has lasted far too long. The path ahead remains uncertain, but one thing is clear. A resolution is necessary to address the occupation and the broader conflict.